Boy, that's really fooling me. I wouldn't have guessed they were the same thing. He says, no, it doesn't say that either, you smart ass. It never says you return to anything. The second step, it says you come to believe in something. The only thing it ever says you return to says you may want to someday return to normal living. And in your case, you don't want to do that either. He was not nice. He says, you come to believe in a power greater than yourself. I know that. Okay, how do I do that? Can I go to church? He says, no. He says, don't you believe in any kind of a God? I said, no. He says, you believe in AA? I said, no. It's all right, but it's not much. Not enough for me. He says, do you think I'm doing better than you are? I said, I guess you are. Congratulations, I'm your new higher power. And I could accept that. And he became there's something just deliciously rebellious and evil about it. And I just, okay. And he became my higher power. A lot of people said, you can't have a human being as your higher power. I'll tell you something. If you're new and struggling, you have for a higher power whatever you can believe in. Because it's so much better to have a sponsor you believe in than pretend to have a God you don't believe in. Because you look good at the meetings, but you may kill yourself in the night. When it gets to be 2 o'clock in the morning and you got to turn to what you believe and you've been shucking them, you're gone. So he got to be my higher power. And I did things to please that old son of a bitch, not because I wanted him to feel good, but I wanted to get off my case. And I tried to avoid him as much as possible. But he always, he was always on me like, you go to work today? No, Bob, I didn't. I got thinking about my kids. I lost them for good, and all the jobs I've had, various opportunities. And now I'm just living in an abandoned car, Bob, and I couldn't face it. I don't want to hear that shit. Go to work. I'd go to work. Some mornings I went to work just so I could bump into him at night. He'd say, did you go to work? Yes, I went to work. I really fixed him. Well, say, so you're going to come to believe in something to what? To restore you to sanity. Boy, I'll tell you. Apart from our natural dislike of becoming insane, I hear a lot of people talk about, I think I'm insane. I'm going to commit myself to a hospital. You go to Big Spring and take a lot of shock treatments like I did. You will not talk much about being insane after that. You say, I'm straight as an arrow, swear to Christ. You get sick of testing light bulbs. Oh, it works. The funny thing about sanity is an abstraction. You could read 10 books on mental health and you get 10 different definitions of sanity. Sanity can be, I used to think at one time, a lot of people do, if you're sane, totally sane, you're happy and content all the time. But that isn't true. The only person I've ever known who smiled all the time was the guy in the next bed to mine in the shock ward. How you doing today, Fred? Just fine. Now remember, he'll never get out of there until he stops smiling. When he's smiling all the time, it means he's terribly sick, which gives you something to hope for. But oddly enough, definitions of insanity are quite precise. Definitions of sanity are very imprecise. What's insanity? Insanity is psychosis, as they call it. It's when the brain, under sufficient long-term conflict, intense conflict, will provide a defense by altering its perception of reality. Now, it could be just a little bit, just see one thing different as it is, or you can see it all different than it is. But that's psychosis. Your brain will make things look different than they are to reduce the conflict. It seems like that's a rather drastic thing, but it is a drastic thing. because the brain is fighting for its own survival. And you have no control over that. And psychosis, we talk about psychosis as something we get and lose and get and lose. Once you are psychotic, you stay psychotic. The chances of ever coming back from psychosis are minimal. You get feeling crazy around here, but you don't become psychotic. Psychosis is when you don't feel all that bad. You just now realize they are all sick. Psychotics really are quite comfortable as a rule. But they cannot live in the world because it's an unreal world. So, it's an odd thing. Alcoholics almost never become psychotic. Isn't that funny? The cases of alcoholics becoming psychotic are extremely rare. But you say, how can that be? They say that alcoholic insanity is the second greatest cause of alcoholism is the second greatest cause of insanity. And it is. But not from that. Alcoholic insanity is a physical condition, not a mental condition. When you have ingested enough alcohol over a period of time, and it varies from body to body, your brain cells begin to dry out from alcoholism, desiccate as they're called, and they no longer function. When enough millions of them have dried out, you go into what's known as alcoholic insanity. Now, alcoholic insanity, you don't sit around talking funny and making crazy statements and acting weird at meetings. Most of you have never seen a case of alcoholic insanity because they're taken away. I see them almost every day, and they're dreadful. A case of alcoholic insanity, I'll tell you where you see them. They sit on a chair at the foot of their bed or on their bed, and people come 3 times a day and change their diapers and feed them and put them to bed and get them up and change their diapers and feed them, and they can never get better. They're like that forever. It's very similar to terminal syphilis, except for one thing. Syphilis has the decency to kill the patient. In alcoholism, you can sit like that for 40 years. Maybe once a year, remember your name. It's a terrible thing. But alcoholics never become psychotic in the sense of snapping. Why? When it gets bad enough, long enough, they drink alcohol. Now, why don't these other psychotics, people who become psychotic, drink alcohol? They do. But it turns out, as we found out in AA, alcohol has a different effect on us than it has on most people. What is that effect? Alcohol has the power to almost instantly alter my perception of reality. It almost immediately changes how things look to me and my relationship to them. Now, we all know that. That's why we drink. One of the great laws we have to learn here is to find out it doesn't do that for most people. That's why they don't understand us, and we don't understand them. And secondly, you could almost make a case, if we had a lot of time to debate it, you could almost make a case of saying alcoholics can do with alcohol. They can induce temporary psychosis. I can literally make reality look different. Come on, household finance. You never scared me at all. But with all the things we talk about, what drinking does. Drinking changes our personality. It doesn't make it less confident. It makes it more confident. It fills the holes. It fills the anxieties. When alcohol is working for you, there is no therapy or drug in the world that works as well as alcohol does on an alcoholic. They talk about heroin being such a great thing. I've worked with heroin people years and years. Heroin is it gives you a feeling of security and strength for a while, but it doesn't work very long. Pretty soon to get where you're going, you got to take so much of it you overdose. And by that time, you better have somebody walking with you all the time because you can't get there anymore. And if you do get there, it's just a gray nothing. Cocaine now, which is the big thing that drug of choice. But these guys get way up. It's like a ultimate, I guess, Benzedrine almost. But they're up there. I know a lot of these guys. No, see the hole in my nose? Wow, yeah, boy, I'm scared. But the one thing they know they're up there. They don't confuse themselves as being in the middle. They know they're up there. They like it. Give me another line, baby. Give me. But people like me, and I presume like you, when I drink alcohol, I don't get grayed out, and I don't get a manic high. Something entirely opposite. I feel I suddenly become solid. I get in the middle feeling solid. Boom! And it all is all right. There's no way to describe that to people who don't get that feeling. Now, I, as my sponsor, I talked about this for a long time, and I've thought about it many times since. The second step doesn't make me really take any therapy. There's nothing written in that step that describes how I'm ever going to get better. People say, I can't take that step because I don't understand how it's going to work. There's nothing in that step to work. It says, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. It doesn't mean that you have to understand how it's going to happen or when. You just have to try to believe in whatever power higher than you are that you can believe in. They'll restore me to sanity. What is sanity, for Christ's sake? Maybe sanity is just the absence of psychosis. Maybe restoring me to live in reality is what sanity is. Being able to literally live in sustained reality. That is the absence of psychosis. And most people like us, 95% of us, will drink and die as alcoholics. Very few people will ever be able to surrender to make that, relatively few, to come to believe. And so you got to try to come to believe. And it's a hard thing. And you got to ask for help. And you got to do whatever you can do. But that's all it says. It says you try to come to believe that whatever power greater than yourself that you got will restore you to sanity. Not some mystical magic thing. Just living in the world. Somehow this guy or this group or this God or whatever I can believe in, I got to try to believe, God, maybe it'll work. And you got to not worry about how it'll work. Because the second step, there's nothing to debate. If you didn't think it would work, you wouldn't be here. You don't go to places where you think it's not going to work. You may come here with fear, but all you're saying in effect is, I'm having some trouble drinking. I'm having a lot of problem not drinking. I'm going to try to come to believe that maybe there's some power somewhere that can make me not have to feel this way. Now, there's nothing really to debate there. The worst part is the third step, because you're going to turn your life over to God, not to the care of God. You try that some morning when you're 3 months behind in your rent. Dear God, I'll tell you what happens to people who turn over their rent payments to God. They sleep in the street. I'll tell you what happens to people who turn over hot checks to God. They get arrested. I can tell you that from personal experience. How in the world are you going to turn it over to God? I mean, I'd like to, but that's nonsense. So I kind of skipped that and I went about my business. But I had, at least I understood what I was in AA about, now staying sober. When I was about 6 months sober, I got a job as a dishwasher at the Gaiety Delicatessen. A friend of many of yours, a guy named Mike Ross in Los Angeles, old-timer puke got me the job. In fact, he just had his 38th birthday at our group last Wednesday. He got me this job as a dishwasher, and I lasted about 2 days. And, I've always been very sensitive and intelligent. And as I was washing my dishes, I could see the busboys were bringing in more dishes than that restaurant was using. So I was able to deduce these little pukes are getting dishes from other restaurants.
This is the end of side one. Please turn your cassette over and continue to play on the other side. Thank you.
And bringing them here to humiliate them. So I said, I'll tell you. I said, maybe this is cute in Guadalajara, but it don't work in L.A., Slim. I'm just setting your goddamn dishes over there, and you can wash them or take them back. Yeah. They're local. Yeah, that's right. And turned out I'd miscounted was the problem. And I got fired that night, and I was going to kill myself. And if you're 6 months sober, and you can't hold a job as a dishwasher, and you're still living in the backseat of an abandoned car, that is not what you call a program that is going to make you better. And so I was going to walk in the ocean, and I couldn't make it all the way, and I was tired, and I called up my sponsor. I always hate to call my sponsor with bad news because he just liked to hear good news. And I thought, what I will really do, just once, I will tell this guy, I'm a good writer, I will tell him the saddest story he has ever heard. It'll bring tears to his eyes. His iron steel heart will crack. And maybe he'll give me some help. Maybe he'll come down and say, here, kid, let me help you get started. You call up, oh, Bob, this is Clancy. Clancy, why aren't you working? And Bob, no. Just let me say something, Bob. Bob, I'm not going to tell you that my life is sad. I live in this car, and I understand that. I'm used to it. And I lost my kids, and that's all right. A lot of people have done that, and I've lost my career and got no front teeth. And all these things, you know about those things. But, Bob, the thing you don't understand is that even in AA, where I'm trying to stay sober, people don't, they treat me as something different, Bob. I sit down and have a cup of coffee at a table with a guy, and he gets up and moves to a different table. Sponsors tell their babies not to run with me because I'm a loser. I never get called on in any participation meeting. I've never been asked to lead the meeting or read chapter 5. It's as though there's something terribly different about me, and it holds forth in the world, Bob, and there's something terribly unsettling. And there's some aura I'm giving out, Bob, that is going to consume me. And I suddenly stopped and thought, this is true. The worst story I could think of was mine. I burst into tears. I tell you, that's the saddest thing I ever heard. I said, Bob, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? He said, why don't you write your goddamn inventory the way I told you? And that caught my attention, because I just got done 2 weeks before that telling him I don't have to write an inventory, because I've been in psychoanalysis for many thousands of dollars worth years ago. When you've done that, you don't need to write an inventory. And besides that, an inventory, when you're feeling bad, is counterproductive. And I said, Bob, in my judgment, that's the last thing in the world I need is a goddamn inventory. I told you that. I need something to feel better, not worse. I need to get rid of these memories. She said, in your judgment, who gives a hell about your judgment? You live in the back seat of an abandoned car. If I wanted your judgment, I'd go down and put my head in the window and ask you. I'm living in a big house in Pacific Palisades. Who cares how it looks to you? You're a loser. Oh, boy, that really hurt. If I would have had the money, I would have called the World Service Office in New York. Just want you to know there's an old-timer in California killing newcomers. And I'll tell you his name. It's funny how the world goes around. It's now 27 years later. When I talk to the World Service Office in New York, I say, no, I'm not. But that day I wrote an inventory. It got me so upset I wrote an inventory. Something I swore I'd never do. And a short time after that I went in his car and we rode along the ocean and I read it to him. And I was afraid about that because I was so upset when I wrote my inventory. There were things in there in which I wasn't the hero. And I put in things I'd never told my psychiatrist, and I was afraid to read them to him. We got up near Oxnard, and I thought, he's going to just throw me out of the car. And I looked over, and I thought the old fool has snapped. But I've taken that ride maybe times since then on the driver's side, and I'm a much better sponsor than my sponsor was. When we get near Oxnard, I'll turn my head. Because after a while, inventories are all the same. Different effects, different statistics, different facts, but all with the degradation of the human spirit. In fact, when you hear enough of them, you can tell when something's been left out. You know, that staggers him. Didn't you leave something out there? You been talking to that bitch? There's only so many variations. I look back and I thought about that later. The day I wrote my inventory, the thing I did not want to do under great pressure, I thought about that later. That is the day that I worked step 3. I turned my will and my life over to the care of God as I understood him at that moment. I allowed an outside force to superimpose AA actions over something I strongly disbelieved. And much of AA in my life is that way for years after that. To develop a pattern of living, much of the third step is merely superimposing actions over my wishes. To this day, I always remember the great spiritual lessons. See, you know, we sometimes think AA is, we get spirituality and religion confused, and they're not the same thing. It irritates me when I go to conventions and they have a Sunday morning spiritual meeting. Every AA meeting is a spiritual meeting. That's all it is. The day you hold it is extraneous. You have religious church meetings on Sunday, but every AA meeting is a spiritual meeting. Every AA. Don't clap. You still smoke, don't you? As soon as my throat gets better, I'll be right with you again. But at the moment, I'm pure. I don't need your stinking approval. I've got spirituality. But religions and AA are very similar. Religion and AA. Both are a structured series of actions that hopefully will bring about a belief that will enable you to live a spiritual life. And religion is excellent, and we do not poo-poo it around here. You don't have to go to church. There's nothing against going to church. But what you must do is try AA, is because AA fills the specific holes of alcoholics. Religion is designed to fill specific holes of all people. But we have a set of holes that are a little different, which is why clergymen must come to AA to stay sober, even though they're wonderfully religious people. It's nothing to do with putting religion down or up. And some of the saddest things you'll ever see in AA are rogues and scoundrels who take refuge behind their religiosity to not do what AA says. And so AA doesn't apply to me because I'm at a higher level. There are no higher levels. I am sorry to tell you, to the best of my knowledge, the best AAs I've ever known in the world, the ones who've achieved the most spiritual growth, taught me that. The Chuck C's, the people who gave their lives to AA, and the people who exuded spirituality. I really don't want to hear from some slick little snot with a greased mustache and white shoes saying, here's what God wants you to do. No, I don't think you know what God wants me to do. I think that none of us know what God wants us to do. That's why we gather together to share our experience, strength, and hope, to try to enhance our spiritual understanding so we'll have a better chance of finding out as we go along. But the spiritual things in AA, we have a tendency, as I do, to confuse them with religious. You think, well, if you're going to become spiritual, that's prayer and meditation. Yes, that's part of it. But there's a lot more to it that is not called out as spiritual. But they are the true spiritual things also, such as some of the hardest spiritual lessons I've had to learn in AA. Do what you said you were going to do. Be where you said you were going to be. If you make a commitment, fulfill it. Take care of what you said you would take care of. Do not take out your hostility on people who can't answer back. Waitresses, waiters, employees, children. It's so easy to take that steam and find someone at last you can dump on and dump it. And I still do it once in a while, but I hate myself for it now. I don't use it as relief, and I get better at it, I guess. But it's so, as my sponsor told me, she said, if you want to really get rid of all this resentment and hatred and take it out on somebody, find somebody about 6'2" who is really strong and take it out on him. He says, you'll find how easy it is to stuff it. But those don't seem like, those and many other things don't seem like very spiritual, do they? Do what you said you were going to do. But that saved my bacon a lot of times. Probably the greatest help in AA that I've learned, the two words that have helped me more than any other two words I've ever learned. Show up. Show up at work. Show up at home. Show up at AA. Don't come back with another new series of stories. Didn't show up this time. Just do it. Now there's no danger any of us are ever going to become wonderful or holy. We do better, but as I said last night, we never rise above human being, and human beings are by nature imperfect. And we're strange paradoxes, wonderful thoughts and petty chicken shit little thoughts, all in one, coming out of one barrel, And you just can't ever tell from moment to moment which is which. They all look good to me. That's not the chocolate ice cream. Hold that one. And that's why we have to so often share with one another here, because left to our own devices, my perceptions get distorted again, and I understand. They all look good to me. It looks good to me. I have to have a continuing centering device. I don't come to AA to hear new things. I haven't heard anything new in AA in 20 years. Over 20 years. That's longer than some of you have been sober. I guess 20 years is pretty big in Dallas, but it don't seem nothing to us old-timers. I'll tell you why I keep coming to AA, and I still am active in AA, is to keep being reinforced on the same things my sponsor taught me in 1960, and 59, and 58, and 61. Because I watched so many people who once upon a time had it, and had it so well, they didn't reinforce it, and they drifted right on out and didn't know they were going till they were gone. Some great spiritual leaders, some great religious figures, some great dynamic AAs, right down the toilet. Not because AA doesn't work, not because this is not an effective therapy, but they felt, I no longer need input, I can understand it myself. that is lethal. And you become the Dead Sea in your head. Because it turns out what you got to do here, you got to take it in, you got to put it out. You got to take it in and put it out. The pump has got to be running both directions. You can't put it out without taking it in, and you can't take it in without putting it out. So that's why we gather together to share our experience, strength, and hope. I'm happy to say that over a period of time, I came to believe in AA as my higher power. And I felt better. And eventually I came to believe in God. I didn't return to God, but I came to believe in God. And last Sunday, I was visiting my little old mother in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. She's too feeble now. She's sick and weak. And I couldn't take her to church. But I drove by the Our Savior's Lutheran Church, and God there is just the same God that sits in here.